Well, here we are. Let's put this to rest, finally. So after many weeks of kind of being very depressed by all the comings and goings in the actual real world and tragedies that are taking place, I honestly was kind of rooting for this movie a little bit. To kind of be something very much how, you know, when 9/11 happened and then all of a sudden along came Spider-Man and kind of brought a lot of people out of their funk and like, look, a hero. You know, something heroic we can kind of get behind here. Like, I wholeheartedly feel that a lot of Spider-Man's success in 2002 was attributed to people just wanting to have something uplifting in their life for escapism purposes following 9/11. And I was kind of hedging my bets that maybe this movie could be that for me in a way. That despite all the vitriol and all the naysaying and calling people misogynists and calling people SJWs and just back and forth, that maybe after getting some clarity of how shitty the real world is, this movie could be kind of that escapism for some people. A much needed laugh, something light, something kind of just frivolous, ultimately. Before I get into my actual review, I'm just going to put this out here. I know I'm probably going to get shit from either side on this. I'm not really sure the way the wind blows with people on the internet. So, probably get some people saying, oh, misogynist. Probably going to get some people saying, oh, SJW. Let me just say here now, I'm just a guy who went to go see a movie in the long run. A guy who likes the original franchise of Ghostbusters. A guy who actually likes Ghostbusters too. A guy who remembers enjoying the cartoon from time to time, even though I was more of a Turtles guy personally. And a guy who's like, you know what? As much as reboots and remakes are kind of fatiguing me, I'll give this thing a shot. Why not? So that being said, I'm gonna put my thoughts out here on this video, and then I'm done talking about this movie. Did Ghostbusters 2016 work for me? Not really. As much as I want to go into this movie to have a little bit of lightheartedness, to have a little bit of a good time and a laugh, ultimately it really kind of left me feeling apathetic about the whole thing. I don't hate this movie. I wasn't depressed by this movie. But at the same time, there's nothing that happens in this film that can make me wholeheartedly be head over heels in love with it. There's nothing in this movie that can make me say that this is worth seeing in theaters. If you're curious and want to see it at some point as a rental or on Netflix whenever it pops up on a streaming service, go for it. But I can't in good conscience say that this is worth going to the theater, other than the fact that you want to be in on this year's big controversial pop culture handshake that is this movie. If you just want to go see Ghostbusters for the fact that, like, well, everyone's talking about it on one side or the other, then whatever, it's your money. I'm not upset that I saw it in the theater, but as I was watching it, it kept coming back to me that this feels a lot like something I would just kind of leisurely watch at home on my own time and in my own degree of comfort. This doesn't feel like something I need to go out my way to go experience. I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities with this, and I feel it's double-sided in the fact that this movie is, first of all, Paul Feig, you can't do PG-13 movies, man. I'm sorry. I love Spy. I like Bridesmaids in the Heat just fine, but man, it's mostly because those things go for the jugular when it comes to some really frank, blunt, and raunchy jokes. They go for broke in those movies. And in this movie in particular, because it is a franchise movie that they're trying to build up for kids and things like that, it is neutered as all hell when it comes to having any comedic bite to it. There's some moments that do kind of work, but it feels really reined in. So that was kind of a main detractor for me, was that they were, I feel, a little too scared to push outside the boundaries of the Ghostbusters franchise to really try for some darker comedy, perhaps. Because honestly, Ghostbusters, the original, I feel if that were shown today or presented today in that fashion, in this more modern setup, that would be kind of an R-rated movie, honestly. As much as we like to think like, oh yeah, Ghostbusters, a movie for my kids. There's some stuff in that original movie that these days would not fly very well in a PG-13 or PG atmosphere. Remember, back in the 80s, PG, it was kind of a very loose set of rules of what you could get away with in a PG. You could get away with quite a bit in a PG. Like, Airplane was a PG, and that movie's got tits in it. With Ghostbusters, you've got, in the original, you've got Venkman saying shit every once in a while, like being this leering sexual predator. Let's show this prehistoric bitch how we do things downtown. You got Dan Aykroyd getting a ghost blowjob, for God's sakes. This really felt more like a spiritual successor to the real Ghostbusters, to the cartoon series, because everyone in this movie is acting like a cartoon. Well, not everyone. Funny enough, the one character that I felt was actually trying to act like some semblance of an actual human being was the character that everyone was all uproarious about because they were feeling like it was playing into a racial stereotype. Let me get this out front right away. I actually kind of enjoyed Leslie Jones in this movie quite a bit. I mean, yeah, she's doing some yelling and hooping and hollering and so forth, but Leslie Jones is doing something with her character here that no one else in the movie is going for at all. She's trying to be subtle, actually. And yeah, she has her louder moments, she has those outrageous moments as much as anyone else, but more so than any other Ghostbuster I feel in this movie, she is actually trying to act like a real grounded New Yorker person. Everyone's raving about Kate McKinnon's performance in this movie. I'm sorry. Yeah, she's got she's got quirks. She's got little comedic tics here and there and everything like that. But that's not a character. That's not, I mean, it's a performance, sure, but it's just a series of things. It's the same kind of thing I took issue with when it came to Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor in Batman v Superman. Lex Luthor in that movie is not a character. He's just a series of little, like, quirks, and he gets to spout off dialogue that sounds more regal and important than what it actually is. Here in Ghostbusters, Kate McKinnon gets all the techno babble, and she gets to kind of be like that quirky character in the background who's always giving that weird look, but that doesn't resound to me as a character. She's given like one moment towards the end of the movie when they're kind of giving a toast. Honestly, if there had been a couple of more moments of her character just being played down a little bit, maybe this moment could have come off as more of a emotional impact, because she ends up saying, like, I never thought I'd have a friend as good as Melissa McCarthy or have a family as great as you guys. And had, you know, and I mean, she's doing it in a comedic way too, but I could tell that I had a feeling like that was supposed to be a big emotional payoff for this character. Like, that was supposed to be a big moment. And had she had opportunities to play, again, more subtle moments with Holtzman, it might have had a response from me, but it just really fell flat in that point. Whereas with like Leslie Jones, everyone else in the scene is chewing scenery, and she'll be kind of, you know, just being Leslie Jones, honestly. Like I haven't really followed recent SNL. I haven't really followed it since about the early 2000s or so. But from what I've seen, from watching her, like when she did her reaction video to Game of Thrones on Seth Meyers, or whenever I've seen her in a sketch here or there, she's not putting on a character. She's really just kind of playing herself, and that's what's working for me in this movie more than anything else. Because in the original movies, and I'm sorry, but this phrase is going to come up quite a bit, because this is what happens when you do the reboot remake thing, is you're gonna have comparisons drawn up to the previous franchise. In the original movies, even in the second one, which tried to kidify stuff, they were still being subtle. Bill Murray, yeah, he's a smartass, he's a jokester in a way, and everything like that, but he always had this kind of grounded bit of cynicism in him, that even when he's dealing with all this crazy, spooktacular stuff, and the gates of Gozer are opening up and everything like that, he's still got this kind of wink to the audience, like, can you believe this shit that we're dealing with right now? And that worked for me. Even when I was a young kid, that kind of comedy worked for me, where he's got one foot in one world and another foot in the other. He's in on the joke, but at the same time, he's devoting enough of his charm and charisma and performance to investing in this story a bit. And the others did that too. Dan Aykroyd, for all of Ray Stance's uber ghost fanboyism, I like to call it, he has more downplayed moments, like when he's talking to Winston in the car about the dead rising from the grave, and he has like this really quiet, solemn moment about like, holy shit, this could be the end times. He doesn't like go full-blown like how he's capable of doing at times. He is actually wrestling with the gravity of that revelation to him. So there's subtlety. Egon, the most deadpan fucking character in that original movie, he has to be able to amplify at certain points. When he yells "your mother" at Walter Peck for blowing up the containment unit and being called the fraud, like, you buy that, okay, Egon finally has a breaking point, and that, you know, he's able to step out of this drone-like response he has for most situations. You bought that those characters could exist in that world, but at the same time, they're not so ingrained in what's going on that it comes off as super serious. Every once in a while they're able to kind of take a step back and be like, can you believe it, the audience at home? And here, Leslie Jones is the only one who actually has an opportunity to kind of do that at times, because everyone else in this movie, like, it's a straight up cartoon world. I'm not looking for grounded realism in a Ghostbusters movie, but everyone appears way overly invested in the story, as opposed to the kind of balance there has to be between this spectacle and subtle humor. Because Ghostbusters, for as much as the spectacle is there, I feel you need that very dry, subtle humor to kind of undercut this. Otherwise, it's going to come off as being overly melodramatic and serious, and therefore the joke is ruined. It really wasn't working for me in this film at all. But I'll admit there are points where I laughed. There are points where sometimes something funny will happen on incident. Most of the time it was just me being like, huh, I can't believe they got this person to show up. Like, I can't believe, you know, Andy Garcia is the mayor. Cicely Strong is his assistant, but the thing is like, I like Cicely Strong just fine, but the way she's utilized in this movie, she's always this overly sappy, like, yes man to Andy Garcia's mayor, and her whole thing is to be like, oh yes, we appreciate what you girls do, but here, I'm gonna go over to the camera right now and I'm gonna go tell them that we're arresting you because you're a bunch of frauds. Like, that's kind of how she's playing it for the camera. I'm like, this person doesn't exist. Like, even by this world's rules, this person is just rubbery faced, like like a Woody Woodpecker just walked on here. It really just wasn't working for me. I mean, if they're trying to make it more kiddish, I don't know, because there were kids in this audience. I didn't hear a peep out of them. Meanwhile, there was this lady sitting behind me, and she was laughing uproariously at every fucking thing that was happening. Even when there were no jokes, they're just walking down the street. Like when they do this slow walk into this rock concert hall to catch a ghost, and the music's playing, and they're not, I mean, there's nothing really funny about them doing the slow walk into the hallway, but she's just having the time of her life, like knee slapping, like dying, gasping for air, because apparently this walking through the hallway is the funniest fucking thing this lady has seen. I don't know, if you've seen the movie and you see that scene, is it funny? I just thought it was a stereotypical slow motion team walking down a hallway thing. I gotta talk about the villain, because apparently he's another Saturday Night Live guy, Neil Casey, as this villain guy who's like he plants like essentially like New York City's on a spectral like fault line that intersects at a certain point. He's placing like these little devices at certain points so he can harness the energy and bring the ghosts forth out of like these fissures. It's like Pacific Rim with the Rift, except for ghosts and in New York City. He really wasn't doing anything for me as a villain. More evidence that this is a cartoon. Like, he's talking like a straight up Saturday morning cartoon villain. He's saying like, well, if it isn't the Ghostbusters. I mean, it's kind of appropriate that at one point he does turn into a cartoon. He does turn into the cartoon version of the Ghostbusters logo, and you've seen it in trailers, and he turns into not Stay Puft, even though Stay Puft shows up. Tangents all over the place, which we'll get to. But yeah, Neil Casey wasn't doing anything for me as a villain. My God, Peter MacNicol could run circles around this guy, because at least with Peter MacNicol, sure, that's an over-the-top performance in Ghostbusters 2. You know what? I got what that character was about, and Peter MacNicol really at no point, other than saying like, I love you, Dana, at no point does he explain to me why he's kind of a bad guy in that movie. Rowan in this movie has a straight-up scene where he's talking to himself in the mirror and is saying, you've been picked on all your life. You've been bullied. Well, now, Rowan, you're gonna be the bully. Lazy as shit writing. There's no other way you could convey this. He gets, like, calls on his walkie-talkie all the time because he's a janitor at a hotel about, like, hey, freak, what are you doing? He's like, oh, nothing. Well, get up here. You gotta unclog a toilet. It'll be my pleasure. Yeah, whatever, freak. Like, there's no way you can have an actual, like, face-to-face interaction with somebody, or there's no other way you can convey that, yeah, this guy is malevolent, other than him having to explain it to himself in a mirror, because, you know, everyone narrates to themselves, and everyone explains why they're doing evil things to themselves when they're by themselves. But hey, he's just crazy. Let's talk about Chris Hemsworth, because again, this is another thing that apparently critics are just loving in this movie, is the comedic sensibilities of Chris Hemsworth, which, I'll give you this, Chris, you seem like a pretty cool guy. I like you in other movies. I'm sure you have a good sense of humor about you. Chris Hemsworth as Kevin in this movie, yeah, it's kind of funny the first time you see him, and he kind of bumbles in and rubs his eyes through his glasses, and everyone's like, where's the glass for your glasses? He's like, oh, well, they kept getting dusty, so I took them out. Yeah, okay, that's kind of funny. But then as it progressively got more and more of him bumbling, again, I'm sorry, I know this is taking place in goddamn Wacky Land, but even at that point, I'm like, there's no way someone this stupid could work in this movie. Lloyd and Harry in Dumb and Dumber, I'll buy that stupidity in that context, because at least Lloyd and Harry in Dumb and Dumber were comedic performances. Chris Hemsworth, I'm sorry, dude, even though he's going for these dumb lines to the point where I'm like, no one would say this. It could have been salvaged if the performance could actually match the stupidity of the jokes. But he doesn't raise his energy, he doesn't lower it, he's just kind of there. And then all of a sudden, not even halfway through, but in the last act of the movie, he wants to be a Ghostbuster, even though it's established several scenes before that he really has no idea like what they're doing here. He has no idea what his job's supposed to be. I can't believe this person would be a functioning person. I don't know. If the performance had been a little bit more comedic, I could have bought that character, but it was just kind of a gag that fell flat, and then you just kind of watch it drag itself across the floor. And that's really kind of what I felt about this whole movie. I'm not really mad at it. Honestly, I felt really embarrassed for everybody involved. Like, kind of cringeworthy comedy, in my opinion. Every once in a while, there would be a golden nugget of some joke that would get through there. But then, another thing that I'm finding progressively more annoying as we see more of it in movies, you take the one joke that worked and then stretch it out over goddamn line-o-rama. Please, movies, please, I'm begging you. This is happening in good comedies too, is that you'll take this great nugget of a joke, it'll have its day, but then you just gotta keep pulling it. Let's run through a couple of ideas. Editor needs to do their job and be like, that's enough of that joke, cut. And we don't get... There's a point in this movie, they meet Mayor Andy Garcia, and Matt Walsh is there as a CIA guy, and Cecilia Strong is there, and all the Ghostbusters are there. And at one point they're like, we want to be able to contain this, but keep it under wraps. And Melissa McCarthy, or Kristen Wiig, I can't remember, says something to the effect of, well, it's going to be hard to do that because the cat's out of the bag. And then Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy have this back and forth of, well, the plan is to get the cat back in the bag. And Kristen Wiig's like, yeah, but the problem is that the cat is out of the bag, so how are we going to get it back in? Ha ha ha, that joke worked for the 20 seconds they went through it. Then all of a sudden, everyone else gets involved in this goddamn cat out of the bag metaphor joke. And Andy Garcia is just looking perplexed. And then there's Holtzman over in the back saying weird shit. And then Matt Walsh gets in on this cat in the bag thing. And I'm like, oh my god, I get it. The joke's done. Can we move on, please? That's pretty much an example of a lot of the comedy here, is that the first part of this movie is about them all meeting up. And you get way more backstory about their equipment being built than I thought we were going to get. But amidst all that too are these little tangent conversations that just sprout up for about a minute and a half, don't have anything really to do with anything else in the movie, and then they're gone. And it really wore out its welcome as the proceedings kept going. I was not having it anymore. As soon as Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy start talking to each other at one point, and you can tell that they're on the verge of getting into a squabble, I kind of shut it out, because I'm like, okay, this is going to go on for about 5 minutes. They're going to start a bunch of different tangents on something that's totally not going to matter in the long run, and then reset next scene. Because this was a dynamic, I actually thought if the writing had been better, this dynamic could have worked, because it's something we haven't seen in a Ghostbusters movie, is actual team tension. Because out of the whole team, Kristen Wiig's character, Aaron, and Melissa McCarthy's Abby, they have a friendship, or they've had a long-lasting friendship before they, team up to fight ghosts. They were childhood friends, it's established, and that at one point, Aaron was being haunted by the ghost of her next door, an elderly lady who lived next door to her when she was a kid, and apparently this ghost would come and stare at her every night for a year, and no one believed her, and they called her Ghost Girl at school, and they made fun of her, and Abby was the only one who believed her. And so they end up going to school together, and they end up writing this book together about ghosts and believing the paranormal, and then she tries to disavow herself from that when she becomes a physics professor, and until Abby re-releases the book, and then she loses her tenure and everything like that because everyone thinks she's a crockpot, a hack, essentially. So you have this dynamic here where one character should really resent the other person for kind of ruining their life, but then also this person is dragging them into this horrific, terrible danger all the time. And you could have had an interesting kind of conflict there that could be played for laughs, but also played for some emotional parts too. Like, there's a point, it goes without saying, I'm kind of spoiling stuff, but the trailer spoiled it anyways, that like Aaron rescues her at some point in the movie, and there's like melodramatic, emotional music swell happening. It's, you know, the visuals are all about like, is she gonna make it in time to save her? And she saves her. And again, it's one of those moments where I'm thinking, this could have worked so much more as an emotional payoff had we seen a little bit more of this character tension between the two. Other than just a couple of like really petty fights, they really don't have a problem with each other. And they try to develop some kind of arc with Kristen Wiig where it's all about acceptance for her character. Like, she just wants to be accepted. That arc never really is fully realized at any point in the movie. Even with, she does like a good job with this monologue about this ghost that visited her when she was a kid, but it's quickly kind of just discarded and forgotten in favor of slapstick that doesn't land and more people acting like goddamn Warner Brothers cartoons. I know it does sound like I'm angry, but it's just because it's really late and I'm really tired, and there was a modicum of me really wanting to kind of be kind of uplifted by this movie a little bit. That despite everything that's going on in our world today, that, you know what, we could just use a little light comedy. But it didn't land with its jokes as much as I was hoping it would. The cameos are really big distractions. Honestly, in the theater I was at, the cameos garnered groans instead of laughs. The only cameo that got like a modicum of respect in the viewing was when Ernie Hudson shows up. Because Bill Murray at one point, he's playing like this uber skeptic who dresses suspiciously like the director Paul Feig. He shows up every once in a while to kind of naysay the Ghostbusters, and when you first see him pop on a TV screen, everyone in my audience is like, oh, like it was a collective like, oh, Bill. And then I knew it was coming because I saw it again in a trailer when a cab pulls up when all hell's breaking loose and Aaron tries to hail this cab. Guess who's in the cab but Dan Aykroyd being like, I don't go to Chinatown, I don't, drive to Queens, and I ain't afraid of no ghosts. He says that line. Everyone after that's like, oh, again, another collective kind of like death groan from the audience. Sigourney Weaver shows up in the credits sequence as Holtzman's like teacher and is talking about reinforcing the containment grid or something, and he's like, yeah, give me a high five and everything like that. And that was another, oh god, the the bust of Harold Ramis. Charles Dance pops in to tell Aaron, don't screw up your tenure, and then pops out. And then right behind him is a bust of Harold Ramis looking very Egonish. And even that got a groan from the audience. The audience was having none of these cameos except for Ernie Hudson. Because let's face it, Ernie Hudson pulls up in a hearse, steps out, three-piece suit, dressed up really well. He doesn't look like Bill Murray looks. He doesn't look like Dan Aykroyd as a schlubby cabbie. He doesn't look like whatever Sigourney Weaver's doing. She's playing Dr. Forrester from MST3K, apparently. And he just shows up in a nice three-piece suit, and he's just like, what's up, I'm Ernie Hudson. Way better than the Slimer cameo, and I'll tell you that much. Slimer steals the Ecto-1 and goes on a joyride. That's the extent of Slimer's involvement. And then he drives the Ecto-1 into the vortex, which apparently sucks all the ghosts back in. So I guess he helped out a little bit. I don't care. I think that's all I can really say about this movie, is that this doesn't warrant the hate that everyone wants to give it. But it doesn't warrant the praise that some people really are kind of shoveling onto it. It's a very by the numbers, very kind of hum and drum reboot. Actually, one thing that was kind of coming to mind for me quite a bit in here was the idea of like, this really wouldn't have worked with a male cast, because it doesn't matter. Thinly developed characters and shit jokes are thinly developed characters and shit jokes, regardless of gender. As they were doing that cat in the bag sequence, my mind honestly drifted to a point where I'm like, This feels very much like a conversation Ben Stiller and Vince Vaughn had in that Neighborhood Watch movie. And I was like, oh my god, this could have been Ben Stiller and Vince Vaughn doing this exact same shtick, and I would not be laughing at it. So there you go. It's not about them being women at all. It's about the fact that nothing really stays with you after this viewing. If you go watch it in the theater, just for the sake of, like, you want to say you went and saw Ghostbusters in the theater, fine. You're gonna forget you saw it. I'm kind of rapidly forgetting stuff that happened in it, and it was very much for me just in one ear and out the other, and I'm fine with that. I'm just kind of tired, and I'm tired of the debate about it. So there are my thoughts. It's frankly harmless and not worth the hate or the praise that everyone seems to want to throw its way. It's there. Deal with it. I'm done talking about this movie. Bye.